Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into the absolutely high-stakes world of historical forgery. We often think of history as just a neat collection of stories, but it's really an argument constructed from the surviving remnants of our past, things like charters, diaries, and personal letters. So today, we're going to treat historians and scientists as the ultimate detectives, and we'll unpack the fascinating methods they use to separate genuine voices of the past from some incredibly clever modern fabrications. Let's get into it.
So how do we actually know our entire past isn't just one big lie? It's a pretty thrilling mystery when you think about it. Written records have immense power. They can legitimize entire dynasties, ruin reputations, and transfer vast amounts of wealth. And because of that incredible power, documents have been prime targets for counterfeiters since the very dawn of literacy. The stakes literally couldn't be higher. So how exactly do we protect our collective memory from deception?
To catch these master forgers, scholars basically act as historical detectives using a two-pronged approach. First up, there's internal criticism. This is where you scrutinize the text itself, the language, the tone, the historical context. Second, there's external criticism, which focuses entirely on the physical and material reality of the artifact. We're going to look closely at both of these pillars today, starting with the actual words on the page.
Section 1. The Linguistic Detective, Catching Forgers with Words.
You see, a text is practically a linguistic fossil. The words themselves can literally trap a forger in their own time. Take the famous case of Lorenzo Valla back in the 15th century. For hundreds of years, the Catholic Church claimed temporal power over Western Europe based on a document supposedly written by Emperor Constantine in the 4th century. But Valla proved it was a total fake. Why? Because the document used medieval feudal terms like vassalis for vassal and fegem for fief. 4th century Romans wouldn't use those words. It even referenced a thriving Christian capital called Constantinople, which at the time the document was supposedly written hadn't even been renamed yet. Valla proved that you simply cannot escape the era of your creation.
Now, what's really fascinating is that history was bound by some seriously rigid bureaucracy. This is a field known as diplomatics, pioneered by Jean Mabillon. Historical administrations were incredibly strict about their paperwork. For example, a medieval royal charter had to follow an exact sequence: protocol, context, and eschatology. If a forger messes up this flow, maybe by using a title a king hadn't assumed yet, or writing down a witness who historical records prove wasn't actually at court that day, bam, the document is instantly exposed.
And hey, beyond the words and the bureaucratic formulas, you've got the handwriting itself. Paleographers study how these handwriting styles evolved across the centuries. Writing naturally is a fast, subconscious muscular activity, right? But copying an old, unfamiliar script, that requires slow, deliberate drawing, and it is exhausting for the wrist. Under a microscope, that physical hesitation completely betrays the forger. You start seeing unnatural pools of ink, shaky strokes, and a total lack of fluid variation in the line weights.
Section 2. The Material Detective, the Physical Evidence.
Okay, so even if a forger perfectly mimics the language and the handwriting, the document still has to survive the physical timeline of material technology. Every physical manuscript is a product of its time. Early European documents were written on parchment or rag paper, made with wire molds that left distinct lines and watermarks. It wasn't until the mid-19th century that acidic wood pulp paper became the standard. So if a supposed 17th century merchant's letter shows up written on wood pulp paper, the detective knows it's a fake immediately. Plus, scholars have mapped historic watermarks so precisely that they can often pinpoint the exact year and the exact mill where a single sheet of paper was produced. And then there's ink. Ink is a massive hurdle for forgers. Historic scribes actually brewed their own iron gall ink using oak galls and iron sulfate. This historical recipe reacts completely differently from the modern synthetic dye inks we use today. Where modern ink is stable and sits cleanly on the surface of the paper, historic iron gall ink oxidizes over time, eventually darkening to this really deep rust color.
Which brings us to this absolutely incredible physical phenomenon known as ink bite. Because historic iron gall ink contains sulfuric acid as a byproduct, it slowly eats into the paper or parchment over centuries. It creates a highly distinctive, three-dimensional depth, sometimes literally burning right through the page. A modern counterfeiter with a synthetic felt-tip pen just cannot replicate centuries of natural chemical decay.
Section 3. High-profile heists, the Hitler Diaries scandal.
Back in 1983, the world was completely stunned by the supposed discovery of 60 handwritten journals belonging to Adolf Hitler. And shockingly, world-renowned historians like Hugh Trevor Roper actually authenticated them. So how did the experts get fooled? Well, they fell victim to confirmation bias. They authenticated the diaries by comparing them against reference signatures kept in the German Federal Archives. But here is the unbelievable catch. Those reference signatures were provided by the exact same forger who wrote the diaries, a guy named Konrad Kujau. They were literally comparing a forgery to a forgery.
But the physical materials? They told the real story, totally bypassing the historical arguments. When scientists finally tested the physical volumes, the entire deception collapsed. The paper glowed intensely under UV light because it contained optical brighteners that weren't even invented until 1954. The binding used modern synthetic polyester thread. And chemical evaporation rates proved the ink was actually less than a year old. The materials simply do not lie.
Section 4. Catching a Master Forger. The Mark Hoffman Case.
Now, while Kujau was undone by cheap, modern materials, Mark Hoffman engineered a deadly deception in the 1980s that was specifically designed to bypass those exact physical tests. His methodology was chillingly meticulous. He completely avoided modern materials. Instead, he harvested authentic 19th century blank paper from the end pages of old books. He researched historical recipes and hand-brewed his own iron gall ink. He even artificially aged the fresh ink using a chemical oxidizer called sodium hydroxide, or lye, to give it that authentic rusty brown look. His work was so incredibly good, it actually fooled the FBI. That is, until forensic investigators George Throckmorton and William Flynn took a closer look.
Throckmorton and Flynn put Hoffman's documents under high-magnification microscopes and made a massive breakthrough. Because Hoffman used sodium hydroxide to artificially age his ink, it dried way too violently. Instead of sinking slowly and naturally into the paper fibers over a century, the gum arabic binder in the ink contracted rapidly. This caused the ink to shatter into microscopic cracks right on top of the paper, creating what they called an alligator skin pattern. That tiny, invisible to the naked eye mistake proved his documents were modern fabrications.
Section 5. The Modern Forensic Lab, Seeing the Invisible. Today, this whole cat-and-mouse game has evolved way beyond a simple magnifying glass. Experts can now peer deep into the atomic structure of an artifact without ever damaging it. We're talking multispectral imaging to reveal faded or erased text hidden underneath newer writing. We use X-ray fluorescence to map out the exact elemental composition of inks. And we're even using AI algorithms to analyze sentence structure and syntax patterns to see if the author's voice truly matches up. To really put this into perspective, let's look at Raman spectroscopy, which uses laser light to identify exact chemical pigments. It was used on the famous Vinland map, which was supposed to be a 15th century map showing a Norse depiction of North America. But the lasers detected anatase in the yellow ink. Anatase is a crystalline form of titanium dioxide that wasn't commercially available until the 1920s. Just like that, a major historical artifact was exposed as a complete fake.
So what's the big takeaway from this explainer? Well, it really boils down to one word: consistency. A genuine historical document is an organic product of its time. When historians and scientists scrutinize a text, they aren't just looking for isolated errors, they're testing the unbroken continuity of human record-keeping. The artifact has to align perfectly across language, materials, bureaucracy, and chemistry. If one piece of the puzzle doesn't fit, the whole thing falls apart.
But of course, technology never stands still, and the frontier of historical truth is constantly evolving. Forgers today have access to advanced digital printing, chemical aging techniques, and even AI writing aids. It's a never-ending arms race of authenticity. And it leaves us with one seriously thrilling final thought to ponder. As this cat-and-mouse game advances, what widely accepted historical truths sitting in our archives right now might actually be a master forgery, just waiting for the right detective to catch it?
Please like and subscribe.